Black woman walking a dog in the rain? She must be casing houses to rob. That's what the white cop said, right before he handcuffed her in the street, dropped a bag of drugs at her feet, and called animal control. No warrant, no warning, just rain, cold cuffs, and a smug grin. But the woman they tried to frame, she was a former Army nurse. And the dog they tried to restrain, a military working dog, trained to detect heroin within 6 feet. So he growled, eyes locked on the cop's chest pocket. He didn't bark. He spoke the truth, in his own way. And what about where you live? If a dog were the only thing standing between justice and a lie, would anyone listen? Let us know what state you're watching from. And welcome to Mr. 7 Stories. If you love stories that flip the script, hit like, subscribe, and follow the channel. Because up next, you're about to hear the story that made an entire nation rethink what justice really means. The rain came down in torrents, drenching the lamplit streets of Clearfield, South Carolina. It was nearly 6 p.m., but the sky had already turned pitch black. The soaked oak trees lining the sidewalk seemed to witness something deeply wrong. Ariel Morgan, 37, stood in the middle of Granger Avenue, hands cuffed behind her back. Her wet, curly hair clung to her sun-darkened face, a face that had once stared down danger in distant war zones. Her usual olive green walking clothes, the one she wore when strolling with Grimm, were now soaked and splattered with mud. Her eyes were wide, not with fear but with shock, the kind that stole your voice. "You're under arrest for unlawful possession of narcotics," came a cold, flat voice. Officer Trent Halvorson, 42, white, stood right beside her, baton tucked under one arm, a smirk on his face that this neighborhood knew too well. He tilted his head toward his partner, Deputy Cole Renshaw, who had just accidentally dropped a small plastic bag at Ariel's feet. The bag split open. White powder bled into the rainwater, like it had been snatched straight from a drug bust. "Look what we just found under your shoe," Renshaw called out, his voice loud enough to drown the storm. Ariel stared at the bag. "That's not mine. I don't know where that came from. You planted." "Sure you didn't," Halvorson cut in, smirking. "Everyone's innocent these days, huh?" A few feet away, Grimm, a full-grown male Belgian Malinois, nearly 26 inches tall and over 70 pounds, sat still. He didn't bark, didn't growl, just stared. His body was tense, ears stiff. A low rumble vibrated in his throat. No one taught Grimm to hate injustice. He just knew it when he saw it. He didn't lunge. He didn't need to. The way he sat, solid as stone, eyes razor-sharp, was enough to make Renshaw instinctively step back half a pace. But not Halvorson. He jutted his chin. "That dog needs to be restrained. Call animal control," he ordered, trying to sound calm, though his voice trembled slightly. Ariel glanced down. Didn't say a word. Just a quiet command. "Grimm, stay." One word, and the dog held his position. Still, unyielding. Across the street, a teenager was recording. The phone camera glowed against a rain-slicked window on the second floor. Behind the curtain, an elderly woman stood with one hand pressed to her chest, as if in silent prayer. No one dared step outside, but they were watching. Ariel took a deep breath. She didn't scream, didn't resist. She'd survived explosions and sniper fire. But this, right here on her mother's old street, was where something shattered inside her. Something she never thought could break. Her faith in the law. Halvorson bent to scoop up the drugs, sealing it into an evidence bag. "Good luck, Miss Morgan," he said, like he was handing out a parking ticket. The rain kept falling, and Grimm didn't blink. "You can shackle my hands," Ariel thought, "but you'll never shackle the truth." The downpour hadn't let up when they pushed her to the curb. Her boots, heavy with wet sand and grit, scraped against the sidewalk. She didn't fight anymore. Not because she had given up, but because she understood, in a place like Clearfield, sometimes silence speaks louder than 100 screams. And she was waiting for something to break. Across the street, a teenager in a gray hoodie tugged the brim low. Phone still pointed squarely at Ariel. His name was Zion Cooper. 17. Lived down the block. No one ever taught him how to confront injustice, but his eyes never left the scene. Behind rain-blurred glass, his camera lens became a witness, a silent digital jury recording every smirk, every drop of rain swirling into the false white powder. In a second-floor apartment on the corner, yellow light spilled from the kitchen. Ava Pike, 63, widowed, lived alone with an old digital camera. She recognized Ariel instantly. "That's the girl from 1321 West Granger," she murmured, heart tightening. Ariel's mother, Clarice, once helped her to the loss of Mr. Pike. Ava couldn't go downstairs. Her knees wouldn't allow it. But her trembling fingers still found the record button. The lens zoomed in slowly, first on Halverson's face, then on a small bag of white powder that slipped from his coat pocket. A moment too subtle for the naked eye, but not for the lens. In the shadow of a nearby awning, Miles Banner, senior journalism student at Clearfield State University, was filming too, camera steady in his grip. He had originally come to interview Zion for a class essay, but when he saw the police blocking the road, he stopped the car and started filming. No words, just a steady hand, and eyes sharp as a blade, and like a hairline crack on glass. Silence began to spread. No one said a word, but lights flicked on along Granger Avenue. Curtains parted. Some stayed drawn, but everyone was watching. Through the glass, through the cameras, through their phones. Ariel, still cuffed, still standing, followed Grimm's eyes. The dog hadn't blinked, hadn't moved. His focus never left the two officers. Every time Halverson twitched, Grimm growled. He knew right from wrong. He didn't need a trial. His instincts delivered the verdict. Halverson glanced around. For the first time, he noticed a number of eyes on him. "What are you all staring at?" he barked. No one answered. Renshaw hesitated. "Trent, maybe we wrap this up and go." "No." Halverson snapped, jaw tight. "We're doing this by the book." But just then, something shifted. The rain didn't stop, but voices began to rise louder than the storm. A woman shouted from inside a building, loud enough to echo down the block. "We know her. She's not like that." The crowd froze, just for a beat. Halverson flinched, and Ariel, though still cuffed, lips pressed tight, her eyes widened, not in fear, but with something far rarer. Hope, fragile, but real. Grimm inched forward, as if he too had just caught a new scent. Not fear, not threat, but truth leaking out through the cracks of silence. The woman's voice hadn't even faded before another one rang out. Low, measured, firm. "I'd like to hear the reason for this arrest." The voice wasn't loud, but it landed like a church bell in fog, deep, unshakable, and impossible to ignore. From beneath the awning of an old repair shop, a man stepped forward, dark khaki coat, hat brim low. But to the people of Clearfield, one glance was enough. Ranger Elliot Granger, age 57, former sheriff of Clearfield County, a man of few words. But every word he had ever spoken still echoed as a moral compass. For this quiet town, Halverson stiffened. "Didn't think you were still around." "I am," Elliot said quietly, no malice in his tone. But every syllable dropped like a stone onto the scale of justice. "I retired, not blind." Renshaw stepped back. "We have probable cause." The evidence, it was right at her feet. "Oh!" Elliot raised an eyebrow, unimpressed. He stepped forward, boots squelching on the wet pavement, positioning himself between Ariel and the two officers. He looked at the drug bag, then stared directly at Halverson. "Then tell me, how does a retired military nurse, walking her trained dog, just happen to be carrying heroin on an afternoon stroll?" From behind, Grimm let out a low growl, sensing an ally had entered the ring. Elliot glanced at the dog. "Hello, soldier," he murmured. A shiver ran down Ariel's spine. No one in the crowd knew that Granger had retired after refusing to cover up misconduct within the force. But they all knew this. When Elliot Granger showed up, it meant something had gone too far. Halverson squinted. "I don't owe you an explanation, Granger." You don't wear the badge anymore. Maybe not, Elliot said, taking another slow step forward, voice calm as ever. But I still wear my integrity. The crowd stirred. Whispers turned into the soft whirl of phones recording. Ava Pike yelled down from the second floor. Keep going, Mr. Elliot. I'm filming everything. Halvorson's hand tightened on his holster. Renshaw glanced left and right, like a cornered rat. Behind Ariel, Grim rose slightly, not threatening, but ready. Elliot opened his hands gently and turned to Ariel. What's your name, young lady? Ariel Morgan, she replied, her voice shaky but firm. They planted it. This is a setup. He nodded once, then turned back to Halvorson. And if that's true, would you testify to the contrary? Under oath? Silence. Grim bared his teeth. A low hiss slipped between them. And in the fading rain, Elliot Granger did what no one else had dared to do. He cracked open the space between legality and morality. And in that sliver, light began to bleed through. The moment Elliot Granger finished speaking, Granger Avenue fell into a silence so taut it hummed. Only the slow drip of rain from oak branches punctuated the stillness. In a hazy orange glow of sodium street lamps, Grim stood frozen, legs anchored, body taut. His dark coat clung to rippling muscle, silver threads of water trailing down his back like war paint. Suddenly, Grim's ears shot up. He turned left, then snapped back toward Officer Halvorson. A warning growl cut the air like a blade. Phone zoomed in, tracking the dog's gaze with surgical focus. Halvorson stood firm, arms akimbo, forcing a smug grin. Hey, control that dog. He's the real threat here. Still handcuffed, Ariel gave the smallest nod, the kind of nod soldiers give in combat zones. That was all Grim needed. He shifted to alert mode. Tail out, head low, nose sweeping up Halvorson's pant leg. What's he sniffing, buddy? Elliot asked softly, like a breeze sliding through trees. Renshaw's voice cracked. Trent, watch out. Suddenly, a bolt of lightning split the sky. The streetlights flickered, then went out. In that brief darkness, only the flash of lightning lit the street, just long enough for the cameras to capture it. Grim lunged, not to bite, but to clamp his teeth around the chest pocket of Officer Halvorson's uniform and yank hard. The seam tore open, fabric ripped, and tumbling to the pavement was another plastic bag, identical to the one found at Ariel's feet. Oh my God! Ava Pike screamed from the second floor, her camera lens tracking the rolling package. Grim stood protectively in front of Ariel, fur bristling. His stare, one that had seen combat, now bore into the core of a liar, a silent verdict. Halvorson stumbled back half a step. That damn dog, he smelled narcotics, Elliot finished calmly. Malinois are trained to detect heroin within 8 feet. Looks like you just confirmed his certification. A ripple of applause broke out, not the kind you hear at theaters, but the weary, knowing clap of citizens fed up with the games. Miles Banner turned his camera, switched on a 1,000-lumen LED light, and illuminated the second drug bag. Zion Cooper was live-streaming. The comments exploded. Caught red-handed. Hashtag Grim the Justice Dog. Renshaw turned ghostly pale. The rain had thinned to a drizzle, leaving a sticky 75 degrees Fahrenheit humidity clinging to everyone's skin. He stammered, Trent, we have to call internal affairs. This isn't protocol. Halvorson reached down to hide the second bag, but Grim growled, deeper this time, stepping forward half a foot. For anyone familiar with military dogs, that growl was the final warning before the takedown. Ariel spoke at last. Her voice rang out strong and clear, like an oath on deployment. Grim, stand down. At once, the dog backed away to her side, but his amber eyes stayed locked on Halvorson like twin night beam spotlights. Elliot knelt, picked up the newly fallen bag, and held it high for every camera to see. Well then, who's planting evidence now, officer? Halvorson swallowed hard. Rain and sweat trickled down his jaw. He glanced around, at the dozens of lenses pointed straight at him, each one a jury. And there was no way out. From the edge of the crowd, A patrol SUV rolled up, its red and blue lights flashing. Officer Nathan Kellett stepped out, loudspeaker crackling. Internal Affairs is en route. Secure the scene. Thunder rumbled again in the distance. But on Granger Avenue, the real lightning had already struck. Not from the sky, but from a 70-pound dog named Grim, and a nose that couldn't be bribed. After Grim's stunning reveal, the entire street froze for a moment. The plastic bag that had fallen from Halvorson's uniform still lay in the harsh LED spotlight. But while the disgraced officer fumbled for words, the truth took a turn. Sharp, swift, and irreversible. From afar in the street, Ava Pike, hands trembling, eyes bright like they were back when she managed a local bank, stepped down her front stoop. Clutched in one hand was her old Nikon digital camera, sealed in a plastic bag. She called out, voice ringing like a commandment from a church balcony. Mr. Elliot, I got it all. And not just Grim. There's footage even worse. Granger stepped forward and took the camera from her hands. Ava wiped her glasses with a handkerchief, whispering, I recorded from my second-floor window. Saw Renshaw clearly pull something from his side pocket. Then he stepped forward, dropped it just as Ariel turned her back. Halvorson spun around. That evidence is inadmissible, unverified. Tell that to the 14 cameras live streaming this. Ava shot back, cold as steel. Across the street, Miles' banner lifted a white USB stick in the air. And I've got footage from before the patrol car even came to a stop. 3/4 angle, 4x zoom. Clear enough to see his facial expression. Zion Cooper pushed through the crowd, face streaked with rain and sweat. He held up his phone. My live stream just got reposted on the Clearfield Community Forum. Over 12,000 views. In under 5 minutes. Grim sat beside Ariel now, body still, but head fixed on the two officers, like a living radar, scanning for any sudden movements. He no longer growled. The truth was speaking for him. Elliot plugged the camera into the laptop Miles had grabbed from his car. The screen lit up, showing shaky but unmistakable footage. Renshaw reaching into his back pocket, palming a small bag, scanning the area, and then bending low to accidentally drop it at Ariel's feet, under the dim amber glow of Granger Street's street lamps. The crowd held its breath. Some covered their mouths. Some murmured, Where did this happen? Here. You saw it, didn't you? Ava asked, her voice tapping like a knuckle on the door justice. Elliot turned to Renshaw, his brow furrowing, not with rage, but something deeper, disappointment. I signed your certification papers, Renshaw, he said. I was wrong. Renshaw's face flushed red, but he said nothing. Suddenly, from across the street, Officer Nathan Kellett's loudspeaker rang out from the SUV. Clearfield Internal Affairs arriving in 10 minutes. All involved parties remain where you are. Halvorson snapped. This is a setup. They planned this. No one set you up, Elliot replied. You did that yourself. And now, the light is exposing it. Ariel stood silently, still cuffed, but her eyes no longer burned with anger. Instead, they carried a strange stillness, the kind you see in a medic after a long mission, because tonight, the truth she once fought to protect on battlefields was now being defended by her quiet, ordinary neighbors. Grim looked up at her, as if to say, See? You were never alone. Just 3 days after the incident on Granger Street, the Clearfield County Courthouse was packed wall to wall for a special preliminary hearing. The Clearfield Chronicle ran the headline, Retired Army Nurse Framed for Drugs. Town watches it unfold. And that day, no one showed up for spectacle. They came for one reason only, because the truth deserved to be heard in front of the law. Ariel Morgan entered the courtroom wearing a plain white blouse, her hair neatly pinned back. She walked with a posture that held nothing back, as if everything that needed to be hidden had already been exposed. At her side was attorney Everett Langston, 45 years old, a black lawyer and former legal advisor to the military, sharp as a scalpel, but spoke slowly, as if weighing each ounce of truth before releasing it. Across the courtroom, Officers Halvorsen and Renshaw sat at the defendant's table, no longer looking sharp like they had just days before. Their ties were crooked, eyes sunken with sleepless guilt. They were no longer being watched by Grimm. Now, they were under the eyes of the law. Judge Eula Whitaker, a white woman in her early 60s known for her zero tolerance for injustice, brought the court to order with the strike of her gavel. "We're not here to decide who's good and who's bad," she said. "We're here to decide who is wrong, and how wrong." Everett rose from his seat, a 3-inch thick case file in hand. He began with the basics. Ariel's service record, 12 years overseas, a Medal of Honor, certification documents for Grimm, trained at the Valor K-9 Tactical Center. Then came the videos, each one a pointed blade, none of them blurry, none of them vague. On the courtroom's large screen, the footage from Ava Pike's second-floor apartment played first. Renshaw clearly shown bending down, hand slipping a plastic bag out of his pocket, then accidentally dropping it just as Halvorsen gave a subtle signal. Another angle from Miles Banner's camera showed the exchange of glances between the two officers, clear as day under a high-beam spotlight. When it was time for witnesses, Zion Coop was called first. He recounted every second he witnessed, hands still trembling, eyes locked on Halvorsen. "I live-streamed it," Zion said, "but truthfully, I was scared. I've never seen cops act like that." Langston nodded, slight but meaningful. "And yet you stayed. Thank you." Then came Ava. She didn't waste words. "I've seen a lot in my life," she said, "but I've never seen justice unleashed by a dog." The courtroom chuckled softly, but the nods carried more weight than the laughter. Finally, Everett called Grimm into the room. An officer guided him in, wearing a sleek black harness with a nameplate that read, "Grimm, Military Service Dog, Retired." The room fell silent. He didn't need to bark. Just walking straight, head high, was enough to make the jury sit up straighter. Langston turned to the jury. "This dog doesn't know how to lie," he said, "but those men do. So tell me, who do you believe?" No one answered, but the eyes in the room began to shift. The air inside Clearfield County Courthouse felt heavy, dense with truth and tension. As Everett Langston closed his presentation, every piece of evidence had been placed. Every witness had spoken, and it was now crystal clear. This wasn't a misunderstanding. It was a setup, but the one thing everyone knew, and no one had dared to speak, was still missing: a voice from within the system. Judge Whitaker leaned forward, tapping the gavel gently. "Mr. Langston, does the prosecution have anyone else to call?" Everett didn't answer right away. Instead, he turned toward a man seated in the back row, head bowed, fingers fidgeting with the frayed brim of an old baseball cap. Then he faced the judge. "Yes, Your Honor. The prosecution calls its next witness, Officer Nathan Kellett." The courtroom erupted. Halvorsen's head snapped up. Renshaw froze in his seat. And at Ariel's feet, Grimm's eyes flickered once, as if he, too, could sense the moment everything was about to shift. Nathan Kellett, 41 years old, tan skin, close-cropped military-style hair, stepped up to the witness stand, a soldier of order. But today, he was here to break the wall of silence. Everett approached calmly, his voice low and deliberate. "Officer Kellett, you arrived at the scene on the evening of the 14th, correct?" "Yes." "I responded immediately after receiving an internal alert from community members." "You suspected something was wrong?" Kellett swallowed hard. "I knew before that." The courtroom fell silent. "How long before?" Everett asked, each word slicing like a blade. "At least 5 months, Kellett admitted. "I overheard Renshaw talking about how they'd take care of certain people they considered problematic. They called it a priority package. No reports, no approval. They'd pick someone, set them up, then backdate the paperwork." Halvorsen slammed his hand on the table. "Lies!" "Order in this courtroom," Judge Whitaker snapped, her gavel cracking like thunder. "One more outburst, Officer Halvorsen, and I will hold you in contempt." Everett turned to the jury. Kellett, do you have anything beyond your testimony? Kellett nodded. I recorded a snippet from our internal radio. They talked about targeting Ariel. Said, walking with a military dog is just a fake innocent act from a vet. Then, a new twist. Miles Banner rushed from the back of the room, clutching a manila envelope. Your Honor, permission to submit new evidence. I received this anonymously this morning. Inside, high-resolution images of the internal patrol schedule. It clearly showed Halvorsen and Renshaw were never assigned to patrol Granger Avenue that night. The signature approving their presence was forged. Halvorsen's name faked as a superior. The courtroom exploded. Ariel's eyes went wide. Ava Pike let out a sharp breath. And Grimm didn't move, but his tail gave a subtle wag, like a soldier nodding when backup finally arrives. Judge Whitaker raised her hand for silence. Then her voice cut through the noise. With this new evidence, I hereby suspend both defendants from duty and order this case forwarded to federal prosecution. This hearing will proceed, but it's no longer just about the town of Clearfield. Halvorsen and Renshaw slumped into their chairs. Ariel, though not yet cleared, had taken a giant step forward that day, because the truth had stood its ground, and for once, the system began to listen. 3 days after that fateful hearing, the quiet streets of Clearfield weren't so quiet anymore. The story of Ariel Morgan and Grimm had moved beyond courtroom headlines. It had become the symbol of something greater. On Thursday night, Elston Common Square, a place once reserved for summer fairs and weekend concerts, was packed. On a makeshift stage beneath a banner that read, "The truth doesn't have to shout, it just needs to be heard." Voices began to rise, not with rage, but with resolve. Elliot Granger, leaning on his old wooden cane, opened the first town hall. We've been silent before. We've looked away. But this time, that dog and that woman made us look head-on. Ariel was invited up. She didn't read from paper. I'm no hero, she said. I'm just a citizen who wanted to get home safe. But if what happened that night makes a little girl down the street ask her mom, "Mom, is Grimm real?" then maybe we've already changed. The crowd chuckled gently, then broke into lasting applause. Even Grimm walked onto the stage, sitting beside her, head high, like he was greeting the crowd himself. But the story didn't stop there. Ava Pike launched an online campaign called Cameras for Justice, calling for all Clearfield County officers to wear body cams with third-party oversight. In just 48 hours, it had gathered over 65,000 signatures across South Carolina. Zion Cooper and a group of students from Clearfield University started a workshop series called Know Your Rights, teaching residents what to do during traffic stops or unclear police encounters. They even launched a special course for seniors, held at the Ruth Merritt Community Center, named after Ariel's mother, and home to her soldier's return photo from Iraq. And for the first time ever, the Clearfield Police Department held a public press conference, announcing ongoing talks with the City Council to establish an independent civilian oversight board, including voices from communities of color, veterans, and the wrongfully accused. But perhaps the most unforgettable moment came when Grimm, for the first time, was honored as an official resident of Clearfield. At a ceremony led by the mayor, he received a custom gold medal. He didn't bark, didn't wag wildly. He simply stood beside Ariel, as always, steady, silent, not needing praise to do what was right. As the trial entered its third week, no one expected the final turning point to come from an old piece of footage. That morning, Attorney Everett Langston entered the courtroom with a small USB in hand. He said nothing, just handed it to the technician, then turned to the jury. Your Honor, this video is from 2021, a strategic training session at Camp Pendleton, where Grimm served with a U.S. military unit in the Middle East. It's been verified by the Defense Archives and the commanding officer of the K-9 Division. The screen lit up. In the video, a uniformed officer silently placed a suspicious package behind a mock civilian vehicle. Moments later, a younger, sharper Grimm appeared, Eyes locked in, muscles tight. He growled, refusing to move, despite his trainer's commands. He stood his ground until the object was confirmed. A decoy drug cache used in smuggling simulations. No one in the courtroom spoke. Even those who had questioned Grimm's actions the night Ariel was arrested sat in stunned silence. Everett stepped forward, voice low but resolute. Grimm is not just a dog. He is a living instrument, trained in military conditions, to detect danger, deception, and injustice. His reaction that night wasn't excessive. It was exact, the response of a soldier who couldn't speak with words. Judge Eula Whitaker remained still for a long moment, then spoke slowly. I acknowledge this footage not only confirms the integrity of Grimm's response, but forces us to reconsider what we call excessive force, because the only thing excessive that night was the system's failure of conscience. The courtroom erupted in applause. The people of Clearfield, once resigned to silence, now found strength in something no one had expected, the loyalty of a creature incapable of lying. Out in the hallway after the verdict, a young white boy, no older than 10, walked up to Ariel. He wore a button-down shirt printed with the American flag. "Ma'am," he asked, eyes wide, "does Grimm really know who the bad guys are?" Ariel knelt down, gently tousling his hair, with a soft smile. "You know, kiddo, Grimm doesn't see skin color. He doesn't care about licenses or badges. He just sees the heart and smells the stink of dishonesty." And maybe in that answer, a whole town began to understand. Justice doesn't always come from words. Sometimes it comes from reactions that can't be faked. 3 months after the trial ended, the case of Ariel Morgan was being studied in law schools across South Carolina, not just for its legal complexity, but for its profound human impact. Former officers Reynolds and Blake were officially convicted of abuse of power, falsifying evidence and violating civil rights. But Ariel didn't stop at the verdict. Together with attorney Marcus Allen, she founded a nonprofit called The Edge of Right, an initiative that connects the wrongfully accused with lawmakers, legal experts, and communities. They weren't waiting for the system to fix itself. They were redesigning what justice could look like. The group's first meeting was held at the Ruth Merritt Community Center, the same place where Ariel had learned to swim at age 8. This time, there was no splashing water, only the sound of hands tapping softly on tables, making quiet pledges to never again look away from injustice, whether at a roadside checkpoint or a legislative hearing. Grimm, ever the silent companion, took on a new role. Marcus launched a program called K9 in Community, where retired military dogs were retrained to assist disabled children and elderly residents. A new kind of mission, transforming their instinct to protect into symbols of compassion. At Clearfield High School, a teacher turned Ariel's journey into the senior essay topic. Write about a small act that shook a giant system. One 11th grader wrote. Grimm didn't say a word, but the whole country listened. This wasn't a fairy tale ending. Ariel still carried scars from overseas combat and the battlefield at home. But every morning, when she walked Grimm through the streets, people no longer looked away. They greeted her. Some stopped to ask about the organization. Others just reached out to hold her hand. A quiet thank you for years of silence that had finally been broken. At a speaking event in Columbia, Ariel closed her remarks with a sentence that made the entire audience rise to their feet. Justice isn't a destination. It's a road. And every silent step, every eye willing to look directly at the truth, is one step closer to a day when stories like mine no longer need to be told. And in that moment, Clearfield was no longer just a quiet town that once turned away. It had become a beacon for every place still afraid to change. A town awakened by the courage of one woman and the unwavering loyalty of a dog who never bowed his head.